just to give you an idea of how Bitcoin will change the world. So obviously, we all know that everybody on this planet is not going to own base layer Bitcoin. You're going to probably need to own it on like layer twos and layer threes.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So what Obi is doing at Fedimint is unbelievable. Like, I cannot believe that this is a real thing. So they create federations and federated models. So if you're a lone farmer in Africa, you get involved with other lone farmers, all right? And it becomes a federation. Now, I may be butchering this, but I'm doing my best to understand it.
Yeah.
So
that's why I am trying to understand it as well. The community aspects. Yeah.
So basically, instead of like purchasing as a lone operator, your purchases for the fertilizer and things happen in a federation. So when you buy in bulk, everything becomes cheaper. And everything is done where the federation is fully backed by Bitcoin, and it's done with a multi-sig scenario. So there's, X amount of people that hold the keys. If they were to do something nefarious and take the Bitcoin, they lose social capital, because now they've ruined their social capital in the federation. Whereas if Sam Bankman-Fried like screws all of us, he doesn't care. He's behind a computer screen. He doesn't know us personally.
STAKK Nation, welcome back to the channel. Champions. Today, we have the one and only. There's no two of them, okay? Mr. Bitcoin Mike 80 IQ Pleb. Or we could just call him Mike. That is, I'm just reading your Twitter handle here. Absolutely incredible. So, Mike, obviously, you are a strong Bitcoiner yourself. And today on the show, we're just going to be talking Bitcoin things, right? It's absolutely incredible. So, I'll pass it over to you if you want to just give a quick intro on who you are, your Bitcoin existence, if you will.
Yeah, sure.
For a better term.
So about 4 years ago, I kind of went on this journey. I was going on 5-mile walks every day, which I still do.
Right.
And the way my brain works is it needs like information constantly. Like I can't just be with my thoughts on the walk. So I just started listening to audiobooks and podcasts. And now it's become like this thing where it's like 3 hours a day I have to learn something. So it started out where I wanted to learn about money and investment. And it turned into this whole rabbit hole of Bitcoin and the revolution that is Bitcoin and how it's unstoppable. And, it led me down all sorts of paths. I even had like an hour phone conversation with Jeff Booth at one point.
Yeah.
So it just, it's kind of permeated into this thing. And now I kind of feel like I could talk about it, with the best of them.
Perfect. This is amazing. I think when you say talking about it with the best of them, I think that's very important. Because to be able to spread the knowledge of Bitcoin, right, it just requires that deep understanding of it yourself. And as you mentioned there, you were just trying to understand money. And then it turned into this Bitcoin rabbit hole. I remember myself, when we first got into Bitcoin, we were just looking into, it was stocks, right? Stocks and trading options and things like that. But obviously, I had seen Bitcoin. I think the first time I saw it was on some website. But then later on, I got the access to be able to buy it on Cash App. This is like when Bitcoin first came out on Cash App, and it's like no one even acknowledged it. And I'll buy it and sell it. But during that lockdown period, we started diving deeper into trading stocks, options, learning about crypto. And then that's when I really started zeroing in on Bitcoin. But it's this thing that, and you touched on it there a little bit, but I'd just like for you to expand on it further, because I think the importance of this is to be able to get those who are not familiar with Bitcoin to start understanding it some way. That's the most difficult part, at least from my perspective. So it seems like once you started going down this Bitcoin route, it started opening your mind to all these different concepts and affected how you interacted with the world around you, honestly, once Bitcoin becomes involved. How would you say that journey was like for you, or say for someone who's just trying to begin, does not understand
Well,
Bitcoin yet?
first off, it's changing me mentally. And I
Yeah,
didn't expect that. Like it gives you hope for the future, for one. So
right.
when you have hope, it ends up being like this domino effect of like, all right, like now we have something to build,
Yeah,
instead of having like this like fiat nihilism that kind of happens. And I notice a lot of people in my generation and the younger generations feel that way.
yeah.
And it's funny you talk about like interacting and orange pilling people. I thought to myself recently, I said, everybody is like doing these like YouTube channels where they're talking to Bitcoiners like me or, or people that are like building in the space.
Mhm.
So I kind of came up with this idea that I'm going to start recording in like 2 weeks where I just bring a random person on blindly.
Yeah,
Even if I know them, I've never had this discussion with them.
yeah,
And I'm going to meet them where they are, take them through a history of money, and just it's hard to orange pill someone in like 30-40 minutes, but at least if I plant a seed,
yeah,
because the seed was planted in me, and it kind of like grew from there because it's like this itch that you need to scratch.
yeah.
I think if I could do that, and then there's average people that are watching it, because they're asking the same like basic questions that the average person would ask. I think that this would be like a far better idea instead of all of us like talking to our own echo chamber.
Mm.
Oh, we're going to dive deeper into that, talking into the echo chamber
Yeah.
situation. Okay. There's a reason why I no longer join the Twitter spaces. Um, because it seems that it is people who understand it just talking to each other, and it really becomes like this dick swinging contest of seeing who knows more or who can do more in the space.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the important part about it is to get everyone to understand it versus
Yes.
people who already get it, kind of trying to one up each other in intelligence. It seems like at some point that's kind of what it started looking like to me.
Well, there's also a thing that happens too, that we as humans do this thing where if someone expresses like a personal opinion about something that you
Mhm.
disagree with, we
Yeah.
will invalidate everything that they say. So, like for instance, in this space, like I'm not a big like insane like libertarian person,
Yeah.
and people are always expressing their opinions about certain matters, and just kind of like I filter through that and realize that's who they are, but
Mhm.
that's not what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is apolitical. Like
Mhm.
it's like gravity. You can't politicize it. You can't
It's just
say
happening.
that.
You can only
Yeah, it's
experience it.
it's just happening.
Yeah.
So like I noticed that like when you talk about orange pilling people, it's very important that you orange pill people in different ways.
Right.
So if you're orange pilling people on the right, you want to talk to them about liberty and privacy transactions. If you're orange pilling people on the left, you have to talk about it from a human rights angle. You have to talk about the things that are happening in Africa, the things that
Yeah.
are happening in South America. It's kind of like you have to
Meeting them
pick
where
which
they are.
path. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to meet them where they are.
Right.
So like I notice when I talk to people on the left, I tell them, read Alex Gladstein, read Lynn Alden, read Jeff Booth,
Mhm.
but I won't recommend like the Bitcoin standard to them. Like it's because sometimes I think like Safety is utterly brilliant, but sometimes like he gets angry. And
Yeah.
if I lived his life, I'd probably be really angry too. Like, if I grew up in the Gaza Strip,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that he's wrong. It's just it's you don't want to turn people away by what someone's like personality. So
Yeah,
I always try to stay neutral.
absolutely. I think that's the best way to go about it. It's a thought exercise.
Yes.
Develop.
Thinking of thought exercises, I would like to quickly go back to some of the things that you just quickly mentioned. Your horizon, your your insight to Bitcoin started about 4 years ago. 4 years
Yes.
ago, what happened? COVID, right? And we said on the show that COVID actually did have majority effect on people because that was the time people eventually stopped running, chasing after the fiat life and got a moment, actually almost the entire year,
Mhm.
to sit back and start asking questions. And I'm glad that you were one of the people that did not waste that COVID period to learn something new or ask questions, which is part of what we ask people to do on the show is that ask questions, take the time to reflect. Imagine 5 miles walk every day and listening to an audiobook. What would that do to your brain?
Yeah, you'd be a different person.
You'd be a different person.
Yeah,
Oh
for
yeah,
the
I'm
better.
definitely a different
Mhm.
person
Yeah.
now.
And that's for the better too.
Yeah, I think though it's a learning process. So like I kind of believe in like the John Locke philosophy of like we're kind of all born like a blank piece of paper, and every experience that we have is like writing on that paper. And if you
Yeah.
change any one experience, you're not the same you anymore. So learning is kind of the same way. So like as I'm learning these things, I'm also having to unlearn because my biases kick in. You know,
Yeah.
because initially I think we all reject Bitcoin. We're like I worked in finance and I was like, no, this can't work. Like it doesn't give you a yield. Like the same like stupid things that like everyone says. It's not tangible. Like you go through that process and you kind of like I think intelligent people attack it and then realize that they're wrong. Like I think Jeff Booth talks about that, where he's like, at first I thought there was like a 5% chance that this wasn't going to work, and now he feels like it's almost impossible as long as it stays decentralized and secure. And I kind of feel the same way. It's like the more I learn about this, the more I realize I can attack it.
Right.
Yeah, talking of attack, it goes back to that money aspect. You mentioned it, and that's everything that we've been mentioning on the show as well, is that we need to understand money. And Brazen will always say our sense of our values has been manipulated. We need to understand what money is. People need to know that everything that they do every day from the moment that they walk, that they wake up, is for them to acquire value or to acquire money. But it's been so distorted that we are actually acquiring debt or our time has been stolen, and we're acting as if it's normal or it's okay. Can you talk about what your findings has been through all the books that you've been reading and your time that you've been spending on Bitcoin and why it's money?
Yeah, so it kind of started with me where I wanted to understand historical context. So I went into like digging into like what took down ancient Rome. And I think recently, like today, Elon Musk said, "Oh, they had a birth rate problem." Well, Elon, they had a birth rate problem because they hyperinflated their currency. So, like, it's like we all come up with these banal reasons, but below all of them is the dilution of currency.
Yeah.
So they started diluting their silver with copper to get more currency out there. And it's not like anyone took over Rome. The barbarians were at the gate. That's all that we know historically. But we know that they hyperinflated their currency. So like it becomes worthless overnight. The French during the French Revolution have the same issue. The rise of Hitler happened because they hyperinflated the Weimar. And you're seeing it today. It's not like, the political spectrum has these like reasonable people today. It's because people are desperate and they start looking, to politicians for answers.
Yeah.
So, you start to learn that like gold was always kind of like the standard, but gold gets captured and then they build credit systems on it. Me and you are not going to go pay for coffee with gold. We're not shaving off gold bars. So it's not something that can reach 8 billion people, especially in a digital world of fast transactions. You know, gold was kind of antiquated the minute the industrial age happened because the machine started moving things a lot faster and gold had to be centralized. So, ask anyone in Austria who was Jewish during World War II, did they take their gold with them? They they left empty-handed. Where Bitcoin is something extremely unique because obviously it has a fixed supply. You're carrying 12 to 24 words in your head. As long as they don't digitally touch a computer, you could swim here naked or swim somewhere naked as a refugee, and you could take all your wealth with you. This is a mind-boggling idea. And, when you think about what it does as far as not only an empowerment, but there's second and third order effects that I think people don't talk about enough. If you put the world on the Bitcoin standard, the prices of everything fall to nothing. And if the prices of everything are falling to nothing, to their marginal cost of utility value, then the world becomes a rising tide lifts all boats, and everyone's life gets easier because the food access gets easier, the housing access gets easier. You're not having to work, 40 to 60 hours. You could work maybe 10, 15 hours. Then there's like a conservation mindset where you're not in a debt world where you're taking out $30,000, $40,000 loans that you're never going to pay back. So the whole construct changes, and it's so alien to us because we've never seen it before. Because we've never seen it before, we have no frame of reference to talk about these things. So anytime someone attacks it, they're attacking it from within the box that the world lives in. And this idea is outside of that box. Like, it doesn't care about anything that happens in that box. It's something that's imposing its will. Like, the analogy I always give to people, I say Bitcoin is a black hole. You could have all these militaries, you could have all these spaceships trying to fight it. It's not going to matter because a black hole is just going to eat everything in its path. And that's kind of like the way, like, it resonated with me that nothing is stopping this thing.
Absolutely. Oh, this is what I kind of use as my, I guess, maybe some sort of frame of reference for me. Because based on what you're saying there, I think I sort of interpret it as what happens with Bitcoin is that it puts everyone on a level playing field, right? Which I agree with. But then now the next thought process for me there is that, well, if we are all on a level playing field, then we as the general public, right, or people who understand Bitcoin, we are all better and smarter than the people who run these three-letter organizations, whether it's IMF, whether it's Wall Street. Because at that point in time, they are no longer able to manipulate the system as they do right now, right? I'll give you an example of a situation like the GameStop situation.
Mm-hmm.
Many
I
people
love
look
that
at
you
that.
brought this up, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Let's
I
dive
do.
into it then. Amazing.
Yeah,
Let's dive
I
into it.
definitely want to dive into that and
Yeah.
talk about what that represents.
Okay. Yeah. So that's exactly kind of where I was going to go. Actually, maybe I'll let me know what you think it represents, because for me, I think that is a situation that we just keep rolling past it like it's something that just happened. And I think that was a significant moment in history that indicated the really the lack of sophistication as we imagined it to be of Wall Street or wherever these terrorist organizations. But tell us, what is the significance of that situation for you?
So a really smart friend said something to me one day that the ants don't need the grasshoppers. All right. The grasshoppers need to eat the ants. All right.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
assuming you don't get that analogy, where all the ants and these 1% or Wall Street is the grasshoppers.
The grasshoppers. Yeah.
So I started thinking about that like deeply recently, and I realized that like everything is kind of like causality, like cause and effect. So 2008 happens, and we have an Occupy Wall Street movement. And so the cause and effect is people start to realize something's wrong. So we do like the basic principle of, oh, we're going to protest this. So we realize that protest doesn't work. All right. At least not like within the system, the way we think it works. So GameStop to me represents a second order of that. People are like, okay, protest doesn't work. We know that they're screwing us. Let's just all hoard together like ants and take down the money. Yes. Now, what we learned from that situation is we're still thinking in a box because, Robinhood shut the buy orders because everyone was in cahoots with each other. Because if Robinhood didn't shut the buy orders, you could have collapsed the whole system. Like, people don't know this about GameStop. If GameStop could have had a cascade that could have taken down the whole system, because everyone is connected to everyone like a giant block of Jengas. So, if these hedge funds go down in one shot, it'll make Lehman look like nothing. So of course, like, they plug that hole and they do what they can. Now, I kind of think that Bitcoin is the third move. It's the third move after the GameStop. It's everyone saying, okay, we tried protesting, we tried to take over the system, and we realized we can't beat the system. So now we're going to pivot another way.
The system.
And it is the one that they cannot take down.
Yep. Exit the system.
Yeah. Oh,
and,
man.
And it totally makes sense that the people in third world countries that are affected by American consumerism and American money printing leave first. Like, the adoption rate in Nigeria is like the highest in the world. The adoption rate in India is like really high. It totally makes sense that, the first world countries are not adopting it at the rate that the third world are, because they have nothing to lose. They have one move, and that's to exit.
And I think there's also a level of comfort in the developed nations that blindsides people, right? And it takes a lot of time, because if you really look at the structure of let's say the West, right, there is all of the structures that have been put into place, which no one understands, but they're under the impression that this makes sense.
They're comfortable being in debt.
And they believe that it makes sense because it was explained to them by a bunch of people who look smart, right? So whether it's Jim Cramer, there's this experiment of, say someone who is not a doctor walks into a hospital wearing a doctor suit. No one is going to question that they're a doctor. The thing is a doctor because he's wearing a doctor suit, but he could be the stupidest person you've ever met. Now, when you look at the structure that we have right now, whereas 401k, pensions, and so on and so forth.
Interest rate, 5 basis points.
Right. And people just flow along with it. People just flow along with it because they believe this is what, their parents did, and this is how we are going to do it as well. But no one is looking and going, well, if you look at people who've only saved in 401ks, are they living a life that you want to live, right? When you get to their age, no one questions that. So they just keep rolling with it. So there's a heavy element of brainwashing there. For me, when I looked at the GameStop situation, I'll give you a quick story about it. That morning, when I woke up, right, my computer was on. And
talk about the night before that morning when we were doing our AI.
Oh yeah. So so the night before, actually, it's like a week before the GameStop situation happened, right? We were using this application that you use some AI to show some of the
market trends.
Indicators, market trends. And we noticed that we kept getting this bullish signal, but the candles were not moving. right? It was not showing it. And we're like, well, this is unusual. We've not seen anything like this
Just
before. So I'm like, well, if it's continuously saying this, at some point it's definitely going to happen. Little do we know it was going to be the next day. Right? So I get into some
Top
positions,
options.
right? Get some options. And the next day, I'm grabbing my coffee and I start walking towards my computer and I see this massive green. I'm like, maybe it's just some reflection or something. So I finally sit down at my desk and I was just like in awe.
Can you wake up?
I'm like, this is not possible. Listen, man. I closed down. It was we're using a Thinkorswim. I closed down Thinkorswim and restarted it. And I'm like, so I'm just sitting there like, okay, I am waiting for the market to open. This is the moment we've been waiting for.
I'm selling.
I'm rich. Let's go. And when the market opened, that is when the disappointment began, right? I do not even know. I mean, maybe other people have seen halting before. This was the first time I ever saw halting on the market. And I'm like, I do not know this is even possible. I thought this was a fair market. I thought this was an open market. Why is it halting? Get me out. Not only is it halted, but I'm also losing this money and I cannot get out. So somehow, some way, someone somewhere is getting out, but I'm not able to get out. Right? Then, of course, you start finding out that these people are making phone calls and playing the whole system, gaming the whole system to save their own asses.
Yep, they're the market makers.
Exactly.
Ally Bank.
So,
TD Ameritrade.
At that point in time, everything that Wall Street is, all the sophisticated systems that they have in place to keep these markets running, to me, just seem like absolute garbage, absolutely pointless. Because at the end of the day, whether you're JP Morgan or wherever, a scam is a scam, and it's just as simple as that. Fraud is fraud, and the SEC is not going to do anything about it. Yet, society keeps playing this game where they're pretending that this thing is real and investing in the market is something that is going to be in their favor. But we know that at any point in time, they can shut it down, right? Then this is not even going into the fact that you have one person, Jerome Powell, who can come up any day and say we're increasing or reducing rates, and that has an effect on your value. What I love about Bitcoin is that at the end of the day, it does not matter, right?
Nope.
It is representative of what the people believe every time you buy the Bitcoin. So it's that simple to me. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, as far as people just rolling with it in the West with all this convenience? And I also say I agree with you on developing nations having to lead the way.
So, have you ever read The Fourth Turning by Neil Howe and William Strauss?
Yeah. I did not read it, but I watched a video which was like an hour or 2 hours long, something like that.
Yeah. So, like, for anyone watching, like the basic premise of The Fourth Turning is there's 80, 90-year cycles that happen. The guys who wrote the book coined all those phrases like millennials, Gen Z, baby boomers. Like, it started with these guys.
Yeah.
And they realized that there's these patterns that happen every 20 years because you have like a new generation of people that come in.
Right.
And then the last part of the fourth turning is a crisis. So the third part of the fourth turning is kind of what they call like a deterioration phase. And this part is basically from like the early 80s until like 2008. Bear in mind that like almost like half the planet was like born in that realm. So all they know is like a deteriorating world. They don't understand like the things that happened beforehand, because like the last fourth turning was like World War II here in the United States. You go back 80, 90 years before that, they had the Civil War. Go back 80, 90 years before that, they had the Revolutionary War. So like these patterns are like unbelievable.
Yeah.
So like, after like these conflicts, and they usually end in war. And like my theory, and it's not their theory in the book, this is just mine, is because currency falls apart. Like each time currency and the foreturning actually coincide. I don't think like Neil Howe like grasped this yet. So this time is different. I mean, the foreturning is here and it's happening, but where I think it might be different is I don't know if we end up in a war type situation, or at least a global conflict, for multiple reasons. One, we never had Bitcoin before. Everyone can mass exit over time. You know, every other time we'd have to kind of grin and bear it and deal with it. And then two, we have nuclear weapons. And as much as everyone is scared of nuclear weapons, I kind of believe in the game theory of them. The fact that they exist and everyone has them is why no one is going to use them. It would be like me and you are playing chess and you're going to destroy the chessboard to win the chess game. Like it doesn't make any sense. Like it's a Pyrrhic victory. It's a victory at too great of a cost. So by everyone having them, they kind of like cancel each other out, if that makes sense. And I think Oppenheimer kind of like discussed this in like the Oppenheimer movies. Like, yeah, once you use it once, like it's going to be really hard for anyone to use it again. So here we are now 80, 90 years after that, and they still haven't been used. And people always say, oh, there could be one crazy person. Yeah, there's been plenty of crazy people for the last 80, 90 years. But I think that they understand the game theory of this. So wars and power projection are now fought through proxies, because direct destruction is not going to work. Everyone loses. So they fight these things through oil wars and currency wars. That's the new power. That's like a grade above nuclear weapons. So Bitcoin is the ultimate power projection, as Jason Lowery talks about in his book, Soft War, is Bitcoin overrides all of that because it's liberating for everybody. And the world on a Bitcoin standard would see absolutely less war because you'd have less battle over resources. You would see a more egalitarian society that way. I mean, these are just my thoughts. Like, it just makes the most sense to me that it would play out that way.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you're sharing your thoughts on it, because that's what we need more of. The perspective that we essentially attained from experiencing Bitcoin. Right? And it's really, I think for me, I agree with you on that one, because, and this is part of the transformation to me, it seems, is gradual. But I think these different ways of thinking is what is going to change the world as we know it on the Bitcoin standard.
Yeah, I actually think it's a mind virus. You know,
mind virus.
Well,
it is in a good way for sure.
Yeah, I kind of tell people, like, I tell my friends, I'm like, if Bitcoin is $2 million tomorrow, I'm not happy, because although I may be rich, the amount of pain that it would have taken for the rest of the world, like it has to be a gradual move. It has to be. There's no other way to do this. And if you want to pump your bags and you're not here for the revolution, you don't understand what this is. This is not an investment. I cannot stand when people say to me, oh, Mike, I'm going to invest in the Bitcoin. No. You're going to invest into your own sovereignty. Bitcoin, like it's inevitable. It doesn't matter. Eventually, you're going to end up there. It's just like this question of, do you want to start? Yeah, do you want to start now, or do you want to continue to say, I can't pay my bills? Like I always hear this all the time, is I need to deal with the now. And I tell people, I said, listen, you guys are waiting for a silver bullet to come and get you out of this now. It's never coming. Yeah. So you could stand on the track and scream at the train all you want, or you could start prepping for leaving, the station. So I understand that people have to pay their bills, and I'm super empathetic with that. I have to pay my bills. Like, I'm not in like the greatest situation, but I'm not full of debt either. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm prepping to leave, and everyone has to take this mentality, because if you keep staying in the now and the currency's hyperinflating, what do you think the now is going to look like 10 years from now? when that silver bullet never comes and that politician doesn't help, you know, the one that you voted for, the one that you didn't vote for. Because at the end of the day, math is inevitable. You can't argue with math. Like this is inflating, you know, the world is deglobalizing. And when the rest of the world figures out that they need to dump dollars, there's only going to be one buyer, and that'll be the United States. And what do you think that'll do to everyone within the United States? Like, you think that the cost of things are going to get cheaper in dollar terms? Like that, it's not realistic. So yeah, all right, you're paying, and not to mention, like, if you're paying debt, this is funny to me too, because people are like, I have to pay my credit cards. I'm like, your debt is somebody else's liability, all right? And like, everyone on this planet is not going to be able to pay their debt. So like, why waste your time paying it? Like, just take some of that money and transition it over to a new system. So like, you're paying something that's going to go insolvent anyway. So like sometimes, like, my brain just, like, I scratch my head at that. I'm like, I know you feel obligated to pay this, but do you not understand that by you keep doing this, by you keep taking out these giant loans with these interest rates, all you're doing is empowering the system. So it's kind of like this self-reinforcing mechanism. And then, like, people stay in their misery because they're stuck, and then they'll say, well, that's the only way we can do things. Well, it's not. Like, there's alternatives to this.
Yeah.